takes us on to item 12, which is local government reorganisation and devolution, which I am to propose. I think Councillor Leppard, you are seconding. So, just by way of introduction, I'm sure most members are well versed in the government's devolution white paper, which was set out in December. Since then, they wrote to all council leaders and specifically upper tier authority leaders, asking for an expression of interest to form part of the devolution priority programme, the DPP, of which Greater Essex, so Essex County, Southend and Thurrock, put in an expression of interest and were successful, which means that Greater Essex is on the priority programme for devolution and local government reorganisation. And as I stress to everyone, they are two separate things. They are not the same thing. Devolution is about the creation of a combined authority for Essex and a directly elected mayor. Local government reorganisation is about the creation of unitary authorities. They are two separate things that are being dealt with at the same time. Devolution is currently being consulted on by the government for Essex. There is a government-run consultation, but I think we can all be pretty sure that there will be elections next May for the first ever directly elected mayor of Greater Essex and the creation of a combined authority. What this report focuses on is the local government reorganisation section of that. So the government has set out their ambition to reorganise local government, to move away from a two-tier approach to unitary councils. And what they did in January when they confirmed that we would be part of that is asked those councils within that area to provide an update on the progress towards a submission. So we have to make a very detailed submission in September collectively across Essex. It can have different options, but it's a collective submission setting out our proposals for unitarisation of the county. And what the report sets out and what the appendices sets out is the combined Essex, so all the districts, the county, the police, fire and crime commissioners, interim update to the government, which I think sets out very clearly that, one, this is a very complex thing to do, to disaggregate all those services and to aggregate councils. But it sets out across a political divide, across all sorts of things, that a very pragmatic approach is being taken in Essex. As I say, this update, if it's endorsed tonight, will have been agreed by all districts and the county in Essex. Let's hope that can continue for the months ahead, but it certainly has thus far. What it doesn't set out is detailed proposals of how many unitaries, the sizes, any of those things. That's what we need to determine by September. But just to conclude, the one thing that I hope all members can see from this update and everything this council has said is that the only interest we have is about what is best for Harlow and its residents. And there is certainly a strong case that Harlow and its residents would be better served by a single council. And I understand why people have concerns to the contrary of that. But the position of this council is that we are doing what is best for Harlow and will continue to work in that spirit. With that, are there any questions? Councillor Durkin.
I was wondering whether or not you could give us your view about the disappointment that we're not able to work much closer with Hertfordshire, because if you look at the economic forecasts and the future growth of this location, there is more to be gained by working much closer with Hertfordshire than perhaps with other areas. And I notice at the moment the favourite is for us to work with Epping Forest and Stansted, Uttlesford, East Hart or whatever it's called, over those particular areas. But I was wondering, did you have a view, certainly with your background of regeneration, about the disappointment of not being able to cross a county line?
I do. And that is a point that not only we've made directly to the government, but a number of people across the country have made to the government that, the historic county boundaries, or not so historic as Councillor Leppard would tell me, the county boundaries are being put as a literal red line. And I think many people would suggest, many existing Harlow residents would suggest they have far more in common with Gilston, Sawbridgeworth and Bishop Stortford than they may do with Saffron Walden or Chigwell. So I, totally share that, but, we are, and the other thing I should have said, and to this point, local government reorganisation is a decision for the government. It is not for us to make the decision as to what our boundaries will be or whatever the case is. We will put forward a proposal. It's the government who will decide the future of the council accordingly. But direct response to your question, absolutely. Yep.
Then, is there an option then, if we can put our proposals forward, we will make that proposal? That actually, even though they are a red line, if we think from an economic and a prospective point of view, that would be the right thing to do. Are we as a council prepared to put that as a submission to the government? They may ignore it, but I think, if a number of us agree that that's an option, would that be considered?
Well, as I say, it's the government who have said that's not possible. It would require primary legislation to change the county boundary, which they have ruled out doing. And therefore it is, as far as they are concerned, completely off the table. And obviously these things take a great deal of time, money, effort and so on. So I totally sympathise with the point that you're making. But I don't think it's one that's going to move forward. Councillor Hardway?
Just to take you up on that point, this has been discussed at Essex County Council. And the initial feedback, and there has been different feedback from MHCLG, is although county lines are a red line, the new unitary authorities may be able to cross borders, and there will be some discussion about Gilston villages being part of the new West Essex unitary. But it's already been put out, it is politically difficult.
Some of these questions may well be a bit premature for where we are at the stage. So I have many, but I will only take three that I think might be relevant now. How will the new governance model ensure transparency and accountability in the devolution process?
Yeah, so it's not premature in that one of the criteria that the government have set for the submission in September is around governance and accountability. And that ranges from a whole host of things: the number of councillors, the size of the authorities, so on and so forth. So it is something that's referenced in the update, but in terms of our submission in September, which is obviously what's being worked towards, one of the criteria, one of the 5 areas that we have to focus on is governance and accountability, and how that will be improved by the move to a single tier authority.
I have three, but this is my second one. How does the council plan to engage with resident stakeholders to ensure their voices are heard in the regeneration in the process?
Yeah, so this is certainly an interesting point and one of great deliberation and discussion, not just in Essex but across the country, because one of the things, whether you agree with the process of unitarisation or you don't, one of the things I think is fair to say is the government's timetable for it is extraordinarily ambitious. If all goes to their suggestion, this council would not exist in 3 years' time, and in 2 years' time we would be electing to a new council. In order to go through the process of everything that's required by the government's standard, that doesn't leave a great deal of time for meaningful consultation with residents about how they, wish for their local authority to be governed. I think the government would say that this was something they set out to do in their manifesto. I wouldn't say local government reorganisation was. I think they were clear on devolution. But as I said, part of the challenge is ultimately we're in the government's hands here. Whether we agree with it, disagree with it, do whatever you want with it, it's the government that will decide whether this council continues to exist or not, and not the residents of Harlow, not even the people they elect to represent them. So it is certainly challenging. Obviously, we will do everything we can, but it is certainly a challenging area.
I think you've partially answered my next question. I have got lots, but some of them are not appropriate to at the time because they were talking about staff and things like that. What is the timeline for implementation, and what key milestones should the residents and businesses be aware of?
So again, I think there's two. So obviously in terms of devolution on the elected mayor, there's consultation to that regard at the moment. The government are very keen that consults with business as well. Like I say, it's a government-run consultation, but there is a view from business on the purported benefits of having a directly elected mayor and a combined authority. But in terms of milestones at the moment, obviously this update is set to be sent to government on the 21st, and we will then be all hands to the pump for the submission in September, which will be the detailed proposal that's put to government. Beyond that, the timetable is not set out, apart from the fact that they wish to hold the shadow unitary elections in 2027, and for the new unitaries to come into force from 2028. But that is as much as we know at the moment. Yep.
What measures are being put into place to ensure that residents experience minimal disruption during the transition period?
Yeah, so again, one of the criteria that the government has set for the submission is around service delivery, and it's not just about continuation of service delivery, some of which are very complex. Adults, social care, children, social care, very complex services to disaggregate. But what they want to be demonstrated in the submission is how service delivery will be improved as a result of unitarisation. Now, on some things, I'm sure many people would argue having the highways function disaggregated to a unitary authority, most people would hope that would result in a better service. But I don't think the case is that simple. I think there is a great deal of work to do to demonstrate, one of the other criteria is, I think they refer to it as value for money. I think that's Treasury's way of saying, how much is this going to save us? Because what the Minister is very clear on is the current way of funding local government is no longer sustainable, particularly in respect of social care. There is a big argument to be had as to whether unitarisation is going to solve that problem. But evidently the government think it will go a long way to doing so. So in terms of service delivery, that is, again, something up for consideration, but for the September submission, we will need a great amount of detail on. If we take one more and then we'll move around the room for a bit.
You've just answered one of my questions, but I'll make this the very last one. What financial implications will the reorganisation have on local budgets, and how will the council manage transition costs?
So in the interim update, there is, I think what is fair to say, a finger in the air assessment. I'm sure the Section 151 officers of Essex wouldn't call it that, but a finger in the air assessment of what this will cost. Ultimately, in terms of direct costs, what we know from the government is whilst they are imposing this upon councils, whether we agree with it or not, they say it's going to happen. It is us that will have to meet the cost of this. And I think what is clear to everyone is you can have a particular view on the long-term benefits and the savings that may come from this, but the upfront cost of unitarisation is going to be extremely expensive. And like I say, they've been clear that that cost will be met by councils accordingly. But again, one of the things they are extremely keen on for the submission in September is what savings this will garner and how we will meet the costs and how expensive this is. So again, it's referenced in the interim update, but it is very difficult to determine the running costs of what might be a West Essex unitary that's completely differently run to a South Essex unitary. How can you determine that cost at the moment before it's even set up? So it is, it is a moving feast, as they say. Right, I think we have lots of questions on this. Councillor Leppard was first, then we'll move around. It's all right if you've got a question. If you just turn your microphone on this time.
It's on page 64 that working groups are being set up. And I think looking at the numbers, 1, 2, 3 and 4, that probably tells you the priorities of each one. These working groups, who comprises these working groups? Is this at county level? Is it county councillors? And how do they interact with the respective district councils? Where does the inputs come?
Yeah, no, it's across everyone. So the main, in terms of the working groups, everyone is represented. The main, I think on page 65, what it sets out is that it's, you know, largely this has been sort of driven through the Essex Leaders and Chief Execs Forum. That's what's sort of put this together and agreed this. And then there's the different working groups that break down of that, but it's across the board. Yeah. I think Councillor Charles, did you have? Okay. Councillor Ingle will move around the room accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. I was rather intrigued by something Councillor Hardware said, and I wanted to come back on that, because this isn't the first time that unitary authorities has been proposed in Essex. I think the last time was in about 2020, it was kicking around. And at that time, if memory serves, we were quite keen on putting forward a suggestion that Harlow would benefit from, if there was going to be a unitary authority, being Epping, Harlow and Hertford. So I'm quite intrigued, and that was discounted with the red lines around the county. But if I heard you correctly, you're saying there is a possibility that we could put our submission in September to have the developments to the north of the town, Gilston, included in Harlow. Would that become a part of Essex, or would it be still a part of Hertford but part of our unitary authority? And this is, you know, so two people can answer this, and perhaps Councillor Swords, if it is the case that we could put in a submission that asks for the developments to the north of Harlow to be part of the unitary authority, which would make an awful lot of sense, because these developments are going to use Harlow facilities and yet their council tax will go to Hertford otherwise. Will that form a part of the submission?
I think to take that sort of in turn, if you just turn the microphone off. What Councillor Hardware was saying is there is a variety of interpretations about the way forward. The direct information we have had from the government is that crossing county boundaries for local government reorganisation is off the table. What it is not off the table for is devolution. So there is a proposal in many parts of the country. You know, there's an argument about Devon and Cornwall having one combined authority. I mean, when they visit the mayor, which way will they put the cream and the jam? I don't know. But in terms of devolution, there is a suggestion about you could move cross-county. I don't think that is being countenanced at all in Essex, because Greater Essex, I think, will become one of the largest combined authorities in sort of the Metro Mayor model outside the big cities, with such a population. But I think what Councillor Hardware was referencing is there is a variety of interpretations, but the information that Essex Leaders and Chief Execs we've had from the government, we had the Minister here a week or two ago, is that the idea of a unitary spreading across the county boundary is entirely off the table. And therefore there's not a submission to that regard. But like I say, that part of the challenge, and this comes to the whole thing, and this is where lots of councils are very frustrated with the government, is that there is not clear guidance that says this is what we want. Now, the government's response to that would be, well, it's for you to come up with what works for your area. But I think that has caused a lot of confusion in different quarters from different people as to what that means. So the white paper references a population figure of around 500,000. The Minister said last week that the 500,000 figure is basically nonsense. You know, I don't think it's given the government have given clarity as to exactly the proposals, apart from the criteria of those things that the submissions need to talk to. And I think that is what Councillor Hardware was referencing, is that whilst lots of people would greatly desire it, the confirmation we have had from government is that would not be countenanced.
Yeah, there's lots of things flying around, and whether it's put into any proposal, well, the Essex proposal is up for debate, but there is an inkling that it could be possible, because there are a number of anomalies around Essex that would require a bit of cross-border integration. I mean, if you look at Gilston Villages, it's going to be physically part of Harlow. It is so obvious that it should be part of the same unitary. But as I say, cross-county is a red line, but there is an inkling that it could be an exception. There will be exceptions. But officers are looking at it. There's no decision been made as to whether it's going to go into any proposal. There's nothing to stop us putting the proposal in if we want to or not, but it'll all become a bit clearer as we move towards the September deadline.
Quick follow-up on that. So it may be possible, there may be enough wiggle room to put in a submission to have Gilston as part of the unitary authority that Harlow will become. Will we be making that part of our submission?
I think this is where, if I suggested there was an element of confusion, Harlow Council can't put in a submission. That's the first thing to say. And this is where people's interpretation of such a broad topic is confusing. There will be one submission from Essex as a county, a Greater Essex, in fact. That will have within it, it may not, it may have one proposal. It could have within it a variety of proposals. The message we have had from the government is they will not countenance cross-county proposals. I think what Councillor Harbour is referencing is suggestions from people that would be a good idea. We all agree it would be a good idea. But the message, and it is being explored, but this is back to the point of the lack of clarity from government. One week they say we want 500,000, the next week they say that's a load of nonsense. One week they say it's, can't be cross-county, the next week who knows what the case will be. Now, I don't actually entirely disagree with the government's approach of saying it's up to you as a local area to decide and put forward your suggestion as to how to do this. I'm certainly in favour of flexibility from government as opposed to a top-down mandate, but that's where we'll go. So I think we've done that bit to death, if I may say so, and we can now move on. So I think Councillor Shepherd, you were next.
Thank you very much. You sit here this evening as one of just 5 council leaders in Essex, and I assume Essex County Council have not waded in order to become or remain an honest broker in all of this. But you're one of 5 leaders who haven't signed up to the initial proposal set up in the interim plan. Without asking you to repeat yourself on what you said tonight, and you've been very conscientious in giving very full answers, but could you just elaborate why did you feel at this juncture unable to sign up to the initial proposals in the interim plan?
So, again, for the sake of clarity, we have. If you read the opening page of the submission, it lists my name, along with everyone else. This is a document that's been unanimously agreed by all the council leaders in Essex, including Essex County. The point you are referencing, I believe, is the suggestion of how many unitary authorities there should be. So I can be very candid about that. At the moment, how anyone could determine how many unitary authorities there should be in Essex is beyond me. I think it is a complete farce to even think of it. Above and beyond having a map and getting a crayon out and drawing boundaries, without considering costs, evidence, disaggregation of services, all the things that you would need to consider. You know, what we're not talking about here is power plays between councils of, I want this village or I want that village. We're talking about what will be multi-billion-pound organisations running services for areas. And so the position I took in a meeting, and that's what this is referencing, as to where there was a vote of how many unitary authorities should we have, with literally nothing, just how many should we have? Should we have 5, 10, 2? You know, it's bonkers as far as I'm concerned. And that is why the position that we've taken is that all of this work needs to happen. We need to see what works, what doesn't, because no one wishes to set up unitary authorities that are not financially sustainable from the start. You know, it'd just be a silly thing to do because someone in another part of the county has drawn on a map where they wish the boundaries to be. So that is all we are, that's all that statement is referencing, is that we haven't nailed our colours to the mast of how many unitary authorities there should be. Lots of councils already have, they believe there should be 5. We've not done that. We've said we need to consider all the evidence and come back to my opening gambit, what is in the best interest of Harlow. So that's what that's referencing.
Thank you for your candour on that answer, thank you. I appreciate we're not in a position to offer a consultation. As you say, the consultation is government-led and runs till April, I believe. But instead of that, how can we better communicate with our residents, either through Harlow Times or to signpost residents to the work Essex County Council have done in their campaigns? What can we do here in Harlow to better communicate the consultation that is indeed being run by government?
So there is a lot of work being done across the Essex counties. I think if I thought of residents perhaps who have a great interest in consultation, whether the government's consultation is sufficient on whether to create another tier of local government, whether a 6-week long consultation, which is not very well advertised, is a great way of communicating with people I don't know. But Harlow as a council is working with all the other Essex councils to see what more can be done through social media, through local press, through other means to signpost people to that accordingly. Councillor Edwards, I think you're next.
If I remember rightly, in terms of the structure for the mayoralty, there was talk about representation from Essex. If I remember rightly, it was 5-4-4. If I remember rightly, and I may have got the figures wrong there, but there was representation from Essex. There was representation from Thurrock, and there was representation from Basildon, because they were the unitary authorities that were, making the proposal. So, and as I say, in terms of representation, then there wasn't much in the way of differential between the size of the representation in terms of Essex and the size of the other authorities. So, given that Essex, and there didn't appear to be any logic to it in terms of whether it related to population size, what it related to. So, my question is how in the interim, whilst the authorities are being developed, etc., do we as districts ensure that we get strong... I'll be quiet. Do we ensure... And I thought I'd turned it down. Go away. How do we ensure that we get our voice is heard in that body?
Yeah, I've got the question. So I think what you're referring to is as and when the mayoral combined authority is set up, in terms of the combined authority itself and the board of that combined authority. So yes, a very interesting topic. In different parts of the country, this has been done completely differently. So if you look at London, that is a mayoral combined authority. It has an elected assembly to represent it and hold the mayor to account. If you look at Manchester, or Greater Manchester, it has the leaders of all the respective councils in the area that make up the combined authority. If you look, but they don't have voting rights. If you look at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, it's made up of the councils and the districts have voting rights. So it is determined on the case. I think there's a few things to say. The suggestion that was made was that it would be the 3 upper tier authorities, Essex, Southend and Thurrock, that would have voting rights, which I think any sensible person would deem not to be a great idea, because you would have, for instance, 2 very small unitaries in the south east of the county that would have a larger voting right than the rest of Essex, and that is a very silly idea, in my view. In the interim, I personally don't think it is a stupid thing. I would wholly endorse that all district councils are represented on that until unitarisation happens, and then you can look at what could be done. But that is something that's, again, determined by the government, and representation is being strongly made in the responses from Essex County, North Essex Council, South Essex Councils, back to government as part of the consultation to say the voting rights and the constitution of the mayoral combined authority board needs to be quite drastically rethought from what's currently proposed. Yep.
Another question. The one thing we've all got in common in this room is that we're all interested, very much interested in Harlow and the voice of Harlow. And I'm picking up on the debate earlier on in terms of the opportunity to lobby government, the opportunity to have a voice and whatever. I just wonder, what would your thought be to us having, for want of a better word, a seminar, day-long seminar on whatever, actually on this subject, where we could actually look in detail at some of the pros and cons, have a led discussion on it, to see whether or not it is possible for us, either on a cross-party basis, certainly to understand the issues more thoroughly, but also to hopefully come up with a view whereby we could say, okay, these are the various options as we see it. These are the general principles that we want to would want enshrined in whatever goes forward. I just wonder what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, so one of the things the report references about bringing stuff back, particularly in June and July, to both Cabinet and Council, I think, ahead of that September submission for that. And there will be, I can assure you, a multitude of all-member sessions before that happens. The thing I would come back to is ultimately it's not a decision for us. It's going to be a decision for the government to determine what the future of Harlow is. You may be better placed than I am to make representations to the government, but we are certainly playing our full part in that. But there will, to your point, there will be lots of that over the coming months. Councillor Garnett, I think you were next.
Thank you, Leader. Just a point of clarity, there's only one authority. There's a unity authority which would be Greater Essex, and then sitting under that would be unity councils. My question is, before the submission in September, would there be any preemptive talks to our possible partners so that we, if it's the three, if that's enough in the figures, as you said, you know, 1 minute is 500, next minute is 350,000, so we don't know. And if those three, if the three that seems to be suggested, would there be any preemptive meetings with them?
They are already well in train, happening on a regular basis. Not just, actually, I think the one thing this has done, if nothing else, has put some fuel in the rocket for shared service, regardless. You know, it is bonkers that every council in Essex uses different systems, different methods, doesn't use collective purchasing power, you know, all of those things. And actually, regardless of LGR, I think it has already significantly moved things far more quickly than they would have been otherwise. But yeah, like I say, I can assure you that is happening more than it should be happening already. Yeah. Councillor Hardware.
I'm very much in favour of local government reorganisation. The economies of scale it will bring in the longer term will save us a lot of money. But in terms of Harlow, I do have one concern. The whole idea of devolution and reorganisation is to bring decision making closer to the people, which is fine in a normal situation where there is a parish. Harlow is unparished. So in effect, we're going to
I'm just going to jump in very quickly. We are on questions.
Oh, right.
And I think we said at the pre-meet about our views being parked for a second and focusing on the factual nature of the report.
Well, it was going to end up in a question as to what are we going to do about our local representation, because it will be diminished in the current position.
I think if you're asking about community governance review, I have very strong views on that. And that is something that we will discuss post the submission of the interim update. Any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Leppo.
Thank you, Leader. Have we any indications as to how debt will be treated by different authorities, which will have their own debt? Did you hear that? Could you hear it? Okay, okay. Okay, but I don't think they heard it though. Did you hear it? Okay.
Debt levels be treated.
Yeah, how will debt levels be treated across the different authorities? Because at this stage, we don't, I mean, one of the keys to determine how many unitaries there will be is the overall sustainability of the unitaries. So, you know, it's academic at this stage, whether it's 3, 5, 10, whatever. But the debt levels will obviously have an impact on that.
So I'll answer the question directly, and then perhaps I'll just give a suggestion on where we are. So in answer to your question, the government has already said they have no interest in writing off anyone's debt. It will have to be wholly consumed by the new authorities. Make of that what you will. What I would suggest is what my opening gambit was. This is an interim update to the government. This is not what is going to happen in future years. Are we going to have parish councils? How much debt are we going to incur? This is simply, are you working together in Essex? Yes, we are working together. Thank you. We look forward to your submission. So I don't think it's worth anyone spending any more of their time contemplating even details of that nature. I think you have lots of time to do that in the months to come. This is simply to endorse an update to government, say we're working together. And that's where I would steer if you have any questions too. Are there any further questions? Good. Any comments? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair, and I very much welcome what you've just outlined there. I think it's important to focus on what this interim report talks about rather than the separate conversation of the wider devolution in Greater Essex. Obviously, those discussions are moving at pace as part of the priority programme and the construction of an authority that looks to have a directly elected mayor under a combined authority and the potential of a 30-year investment fund, which is a likely mechanic as part of something of that scale, and that has happened across the country. But this is solely focused on local government reorganisation. The report itself makes it very clear, and the Leader of the Council has touched on this, that this is about an ambition, an early ambition to build the strongest system of local government in the county. And there are only initial concepts that are being discussed. I think it is right to take the position as the Council has and the Leader has with his counterparts across the county to say, look, it's too early and it's not appropriate for horse trading around boundaries, etc. And actually we should be following the evidence. And if you see in the report, there is a reference to some specific analysis that will inform on an evidence base what might be the appropriate way to follow. So I think it's important to hold and pass judgment once we've looked at that evidence base, and the timescale that Leader has set out is quite appropriate for those early discussions and then getting into the detail. What I think we should all focus on is what the report actually says around some of the key parameters: quality of public service delivery, identity and community, and of course value for money. Those are some of the themes of the questions that have been asked tonight, and I think that we need to pause and focus what the actual interim report actually is telling us right now. And I think that the foundations of this discussion are quite positive. Ultimately, this is about enhancing economic opportunity and representation for residents in this county. That is the basis that all elected officials, irrespective of political colour, are trying to adopt in these conversations. It's quite clear from the report when you read that. And I think that we should focus on supporting the Leader of the Council in those very sensitive and detailed discussions with the direction of travel, which I think is quite positive here. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Further comments, Councillor Morrison?
Yes, just a brief comment. While I acknowledge that, of course, there are loads and loads of anxieties, questions concerning issues, and those questions will be asked again and again and again and again. The issues have been discussed over the last few months. Well, certainly I've been talking about them. And I know that there will be difficulties, there will be obstacles. There has to be the sort of analysis that Councillor Charles has just mentioned, the sort of homework, the preparation, all of that has to happen. Of course it does. Okay, I'm the product of my experience. I am. And I will acknowledge that my background is not the same as others in the room. I've had a lot of experience of being an elected member on a unitary authority. And possibly because of that, I am convinced of the benefits. Councillor Hardware, I think, said something positive. He thinks it's a good idea in principle, and it certainly is a good idea. What I would like to encourage everybody to do is to have a look at other bits of the United Kingdom where there have been unitary authorities. For example, Scotland. There have been unitary authorities in Scotland since the 90s. That's quite a long time ago. So we can take advantage of the experience, of the knowledge. We can take advice, guidance to some extent. We can benefit from all of that. We're not actually starting from scratch. Sometimes the conversations suggest that this has never happened before anywhere, ever. It has, and in some cases, It has been happening for a very, very long time. I know it will be hard for some people. Change is hard and it will affect people, councillors, the number of councillors, for example. That might be painful. But we can do it. If it can be done by others elsewhere, then we can certainly do it.
Any further comments? No, in which case, just to close this report, I think the point I may have made inadvertently at the end of the questions was that what very easily happens, and what we have seen in other councils, is people fall into two traps, in my view. One is that they rush to the future state immediately. You know, how much are we going to pay the, you know, grade 18s or whatever, you know, in 5 years' time? And the other is that they stop everything that they are doing in lieu of we might not exist in future years. Why we have taken the approach we have is because this council has got far too much to be doing. Residents deserve far too much for us to be wholly consumed as to whether we're going to exist in years to come. We have far too much to be getting on with. And that's why our focus remains on delivering our missions and doing the things residents need to do. I would hope what you see in the tone of the report and the update, and back to Councillor Shepherd's point and the point that Councillor Charles made, we are taking a very pragmatic view of this and of the way forward. But we are not, you know, other councils, you know, we're not going to procure to improve a community centre. You know, what are you talking about? We've got too much to be getting on with to be worrying about this stuff. We are wholly engaged with it. We are focused on what's right for Harlow. But to be honest, I have far more interest in delivering the services people deserve to see day in, day out, as opposed to, you know, what colour the logo is going to be or whatever people are falling into the trap of. So I think this is I would hope that this is a positive update. But back to Councillor Morrison's point, change is evidently upsetting, or unsettling rather, for people. I think we have 450 odd staff we employ. There are thousands across Essex, and I think our very strong message to them should be our focus is on delivering our services and doing what is right for residents, and not falling into this mass panic, which is so often misplaced about